I'm Dr. Andy Kaufman, recovering physician, plandemic whistleblower, natural healing pedagogue, and legal code talker. You can call me the Truth Doctor. I'm here to shift your paradigm as I perform a radical forensic dissection, discerning fact from fiction, science from pseudoscience, medicine from poison, law from legal fiction, and individualism from collectivism. This is your channel for unraveling the truth about health and science. This is the Healthy Living live stream. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and I'm excited to take questions from you, the audience, today. And we already have a number of excellent and intriguing questions in the queue. Let me also remind you that if you like this content, I do every month an hour-long Q&A in my membership platform, the True Living Fellowship, where we explore the 6 pillars of living, as I discussed on last week's live stream. And right now we are having a no-risk opportunity to get your first month free. And today is the last day of this special offer. Now, of course, in addition to the monthly Q&A, there is a lot of content and community networking opportunities, including tomorrow's masterclass, which I give every month. And sometimes I have amazing outside experts come in to give masterclasses as well. But tomorrow I'll be speaking on mortgage documents, and it's called What the Hell Did I Just Sign? So for those of you who are homeowners or interested in becoming a homeowner, it's critical that you understand this basic information. So please do take this opportunity to join the True Living Fellowship with no risk to you. All right, let's get on with today's questions. I'm really excited to see what we have in store. So Alexander, if you want to pop the first one up. All right, we have Mimi W asks, is there an alternative to Synthroid? I had my thyroid removed 6 years ago due to a diagnosis of thyroid cancer. Well, this is an excellent question, and the short answer is yes. But let me first point out that anyone who has had a surgical thyroidectomy, such as you, it is very difficult to remove every last little bit of the thyroid gland. So at least there is a possibility you may have some of your thyroid left that may be able to function. Now, there's no way to tell this for sure without further investigation and perhaps trying some things, but just keep that in mind that there is a possibility of that. However, in an easier way to address this, because at least your current state is that you're dependent on a thyroid hormone, and there's actually more than one thyroid hormone. In fact, Synthroid is just one of the many, and it's the synthetic equivalent of what's known as T4, or thyroxine is the generic name of the drug. Now, this has been a very successful commercial success for the pharmaceutical industry because since it's made synthetically, it is eligible to be patented. And that protection, as well as the low cost of manufacture, allows them to have high profit margins. And as a result of this, there were a lot of changes going on in the way thyroid disease was diagnosed. But before that, what people did is that they had essentially freeze-dried thyroid glands from animals like cows, pigs, sheep, and perhaps others. And these were ground up into a standardized formulation, and you would simply take some of that either in pill form or in grains of powder, whatever was available from your local supplier. And there still are thyroid products available like this on the market that you can get without a prescription, and some that you can get with a prescription. So you can just investigate this and then look at the testimonies from customers who have used one or the other product so that you know that it's reliable and consistent. And you can essentially switch yourself over gradually with what you might call a cross taper, and you can search what a cross taper is, but you're just reducing the dose of one, increasing the other, and to get that right balance and transition from one to the next. So that is certainly possible. Excellent question. All right. Now we have a question from Jamal JJ from London, UK. What is the cause of androgenic alopecia hair loss and how to reverse it? As the current theory is that it is caused by DHT, so people are given finasteride or minoxidil to reduce their DHT, which can cause a myriad of other health issues. Now, DHT, or dihydrotestosterone, I believe, is a normal substance in the body. So it can't be the cause of a disease. So if we look at male pattern baldness as a disease, then that really wouldn't make sense. But, you know, I think that there is a different kind of cause for male baldness that has increased the prevalence and the age that it manifests in life, whether there is some degree of naturalness to this process. And it's a combination of things. So one is nutritional deficiencies. And specifically, I'm talking about trace mineral deficiencies, which is highly prevalent in our population. Deficiencies in cholesterol, which is the starting material for testosterone and the other sex hormones and steroid hormones, as well as deficiencies in collagen, which is the building material to make strong hair, skin, and nails. So these things certainly have to be corrected. Then we have the toxicity to the hair follicles, that because of the toxicity that accumulates in our body, and especially if we have some degree of liver dysfunction, our body will preferentially send a lot of toxins to the skin, and they can end up in the fatty tissue, which is right next to the hair follicles, and migrate into the hair follicles, poisoning them and causing the hairs to fall out. So you can address this also through detoxing the hair follicles, which can involve general detox as well as specific detoxes. And for my journey on getting my hair to grow back due to male pattern baldness, I used bentonite clay on my scalp. And just by making essentially a paste out of it, get a couple of tablespoons of the clay, calcium bentonite clay, food grade, add minimum amounts of purified water until you can stir it with a fork or a whisk and get a nice paste. And then you just put that on the scalp and let it sit there until it dries, and it will like pull at the skin. You'll feel it. And then just go in the shower, rinse it off. It will not clog your drain, provided you run enough water down. And you can do this several times a week, up to even every day, to help detoxify the hair follicles. I will be releasing a protocol encompassing all these aspects, and right now it's available through private consultations. All right, Francesa La asks how to get rid of fungus in the toes, and I'm going to assume that you mean the toenails. Now, when we have the sort of fungal toenails or toe dystrophy, toenail dystrophies, this is a long-term chronic issue. So it's been essentially toxins building up in your body for a long time. And one reason this happens in the toenails is just because it gets the lowest blood circulation. So things can't get removed from there, and they can tend to accumulate because of that poor circulation. And eventually you can get the growth of a fungus coming to try and eat up the damage that's caused by those long-term toxins. So the one protocol that I know has been successful for this issue, although it takes persistence, probably about 12 months of some form of treatment. And then it takes quite a lot of time for the toenail to completely grow out, and so that you could see it's normal, but you will see a demarcation between the, damaged old fungal toenail, and then you'll see new toenail growing, and that line will just migrate further and further to the edge of the toe over about, a 12-month, 6 to 12-month period. So this would be using the Power of Pine protocol, which you can find on my website, the Power of Pine workshop, and in my offerings. And then painting the pine solvent on the toenails that are affected for, a period of months after completing the, 1 to 3 month protocol, so that you can assure that you're dissolving all the toxins there and allowing the toenails to heal properly. Now, you can't do this just by treating at the location of the toenails alone. You need to do a systemic detox protocol in order to address the underlying issue. Otherwise, even if you do have improvement at the toenails, it will come back certainly, or manifest somewhere else in your body. All right, what do we have up next? Kim Dowell asks, I believe you mentioned in the past about being able to cure or at least alleviate tinnitus. Can you shed more light on that? Thank you. Yes, tinnitus, for those of you who may not know the medical term, is a ringing in the ears. And this is usually a result of some kind of either neurologic toxin or exposure to loud noises that has damaged the ear. This is an issue I really learned about when I used to work at the VA hospital because of quote unquote Gulf War syndrome, which is there were a lot of experimental vaccines and other types of novel weapons that people were exposed to during the Gulf War, and many of them developed complicated problems, including tinnitus as being a prominent one. So I think you have to, one, realize if you had the damage from, loud noise exposure, and then there might be a different route for addressing that, but I'll address the neurologic toxin issue, that you want to, the best you can, determine what type of toxin it was. Like, was it heavy metals, perhaps related to vaccine or other exposure, industrial exposure? Was it some other kind of neurotoxic chemical? Were you working in the chemical industry or in a laboratory? And based on the nature of the toxin, you might have a different approach. So if it's a fat soluble toxin, for example, then the Power of Pine protocol would be a good approach. If it is a heavy metal, then you want to use natural chelating substances like cilantro, zeolite, and bentonite clay. And I have a heavy metal detox protocol as well. So that is kind of the pathway, and lots of people have had success. And this symptom, depending on how severe it is, it can be quite disabling because it's kind of like a form of mental torture. So if anyone has a severe case, please do consider a consultation, and we can figure out what is the most likely cause and a pathway to help your body heal from that. All right, Fiddle Witch has a question for Dr. Andy. In the germ versus terrain discussion, please explain the transfer of prion disease like they had in UK from beef that was fed wild beef. Okay, so this is something that's just a story, but not actually backed up by evidence or scientific scrutiny. And I would certainly direct everyone to my channel on Rumble, because this would be censored on other platforms. But I interviewed Daniel Roydus about his relatively new book, Can You Catch a Cold?, where he reviewed over 200 studies about contagion. And not one of these studies was able to provide any evidence to confirm that contagion is a real disease. Now, if you want to talk specifically about mad cow disease, I would direct you to the book, What Really Makes You Ill, by David Parker and Dawn Lester, because they did some excellent research and showed how that they were spraying those cows with a pesticide to rid them of some kind of nuisance fly that would, land on their body and irritate them. And that they were overusing this in very high doses, and it's a neurological toxin. And they were able to present this alternative theory with excellent correlational data that this pesticide poison could easily have created these cases of alleged mad cow, and that it had nothing to do with anything being transferred through the feed. So please do look into those sources and decide for yourself what is going on. All right. Next, we have Pamela Smith. About the effects of Paxlovid as a COVID treatment and as a protease inhibitor, I'd like to ask live. Well, Pamela, unfortunately, this platform doesn't allow us to bring audience members on to ask live, but that is something I do offer inside the True Living Fellowship. So if that's something that you'd like to do, and I love interacting with the fellows there, so we can have a little back and forth and make it a little bit more enriching than just me responding to a written question, please do check that out. So, can't be treatment for something that doesn't exist. So in one sense, we can just toss this out at face value. But the way that they evaluate these chemicals to call them quote unquote antiviral is really a farce. It's all kind of molecular trickery by looking at things like PCR test results when the PCR is assessing the levels of a DNA sequence that we don't know where it comes from. But they're just pretending that it represents a virus. And so if they mix some chemicals in a petri dish with a cell culture that they say has a virus in it, and they measure some different things like that, they draw all kinds of conclusions, but it's based on 100 assumptions that are not true. So really, drugs like this are only one thing: they are poison and a deceptive practice for commercial gain. So I would avoid them at all costs. Okay, Dory Johnston says, in a past interview, you mentioned that the first thing you suggest one to do is get a particular passport, which you showed to police officers if ever pulled over. Do you still suggest this? I'm not sure if this was a suggestion that came from me or perhaps someone that I interviewed. But I have, so you certainly can use a passport as an identification document for traveling. And if you look in your passport, right inside the cover, there's a statement from the Secretary of State, basically instructing whoever is, on the other end, like a police officer, for example, that they should, aid you in your travel and not stand in your way. And if you read that carefully and you believe that and you behave in such a way, I think you can be successful using your passport, provided you don't have a driver's license. But I don't think there's evidence that there's any special kind of passport that someone can get other than someone who is a diplomat. And even with a diplomatic passport, you can only use that when you're on a diplomatic mission. You can't just use it for leisure or other travel. So I have seen evidence in videos, right, of people getting pulled over for a traffic infraction and using their passport rather than a license and being successful in not getting any tickets. I just don't know if there's any kind of special passport for that or if any passport will work for that. And one of the issues that comes up here is that there are many who believe that they are U.S. citizens under the 14th Amendment, and that if they are issued a passport, that it's as a citizen status, and that if they do some paperwork, that they can change that status to be a U.S. national or a state national, and then that will afford them, the ability to not be policed on the roadways and many other benefits. But if other people have sent Freedom of Information Act requests to the government, to various departments like the State Department, and said, am I a U.S. citizen, or is there any documentary evidence that I am a U.S. citizen? And they always come back saying that the government department does not have such evidence. And this is a key point, that we, the men and women of flesh and blood, are not U.S. citizens. It is the so-called strawman entity, ens legis, the trust, the all caps name, that fictional entity, right? That person, that is the U.S. citizen. So when you're traveling, are you traveling, you, the man, or are you traveling as the agent or the representative of that citizen in commerce? And you have to think about this carefully, because if you are in commerce, then those are all commercial regulations, all of the traffic laws, and then you would need to have a license. And you have to consider carefully what is commerce. And if you're going to the store and you're going to exchange cash, a credit card, a check, those are all negotiable instruments. So you're in commerce if you're doing that. So there's a lot to consider in terms of the traffic rules and regulations. And I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, but I don't think that it would be worth your time trying to get some kind of new passport. All right, Dana Jones, should DMSO be administered to improve one's vision? Well, this obviously would be in the form of eye drops. And if you look into Amanda Vollmer's website, she has the DMSO store where she has pre-formulated, I believe, 20% and 40% eye drops. I've tried both. I would recommend going with the higher percentage. And you can, there's instructions on the product page of exactly how to use this. But one thing to keep in mind is that in her experience, people using this for cataracts, which generally are excellent results for, have much better results if they also address their liver simultaneously. And this could be done in a number of ways. I have the Love Your Liver workshop and protocol, for example, coffee enemas, liver flushes, homeopathic liver preparations are different ways to combine with the eye drops in order to get optimal results. Now, if you're trying to improve a error or a problem with your visual acuity, such as short-sightedness or far-sightedness, then you also want to do some kind of eye exercises. Eye yoga is one of them. There are many out there. Some of them just involve using a typical Snell chart, the alphabet chart like that would have at the eye doctor, and using it without glasses, different exercises, changing your focal distance. You can find lots of things out there. You can even find apps that will, remind you and guide you through some of these exercises. So there are many ways to go about this. And the one thing I would caution everyone is don't go and keep getting new prescriptions for stronger and stronger glasses, because it is a vicious cycle that your vision will get worse and worse. I think it's better to stick where you're at currently. I've had these same prescription, for example, for going on 7 years now. In fact, I need some new lenses because they're getting kind of scratched up at this point, but I'm not going to, change the prescription. If anything, I would make it weaker, because when you challenge your eyes, they will get stronger, whereas the more you aid them, the weaker they get. And that's kind of a general principle. All right. Based Chad asks, is it safe to cook on a gas barbecue grill every day? So I don't see clear evidence of any health problems cooking on a fire. And certainly a gas grill makes quite a clean fire with a lot of less impurities than burning wood. But if we look back historically and see when humans started using fire to cook their meat and how it affected their health and look at the evidence of, the exposure to this kind of food, I don't think, you can find too many faults. If we, just take a broad look at modern illness, right? So something like heart attacks, for example, it may surprise you to know that the first heart attack in the United States was reported in the medical literature in 1912. So before that, there was no significant cardiovascular disease. We can look at many, many other of the modern ills, things like cancer, for example, and see that they are really modern illnesses. Obviously, HIV and AIDS wasn't invented even until like the late 70s, early 80s, even though all those illnesses that it encompassed were on the books. So many of these things did not exist, yet we were using fire to cook our food. So that means, cooking food with fire could not have caused these health problems. So I think that's just a general broad stroke way, to look at it and come to the conclusion that even if there might be maybe, it's not the best way to cook your food possible, it certainly is not responsible for any significant health problems. All right, Miriam asks, what are the best natural alternatives for oral hygiene? Well, natural alternatives to what, of course, is the question. So, oral hygiene, the biggest and most significant aspect to have healthy teeth is what you eat. When you eat processed carbohydrates and processed sugars, that is going to result in tooth decay and dental problems. Also, if you have systemic illness, like your body is full of toxins, your mouth is also going to be affected. So you first need to have a healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle. And if you've been unhealthy up to now, do some major cleansing in order to kind of reset things and have better oral hygiene. Now, in terms of how do you care, for your teeth, then of course, toothbrushing, but toothpaste is not necessary. And you certainly don't want toothpaste with poisonous substances like fluoride and many other things. And you can look at the Healthy Living app from the Environmental Working Group to find some toothpastes that, don't have these dangerous ingredients, that have only, pretty harmless ingredients. But the only reason to use toothpaste is if you really like the flavor. By the way, the substances that create the foaming action of toothpaste are among those that are dangerous. So I would recommend saying goodbye to that foaming action. But you can just brush your teeth with water. You can also use something called Ipsab powder, which is a mixture, I believe, of a type of tree bark with salt. You could certainly use salt. You can use baking soda. I am not a huge fan of the baking soda because of the making your mouth more alkaline, but it will restore its balance pretty quickly. And then my favorite is probably charcoal, which you can just mix into kind of like a coarse paste with a little bit of water, and use that for whitening and stain removal. Of course, you can also use dental tools to scrape off some of the calculus and stain periodically. Make sure you're careful and you know what you're doing if you're going to do that. Otherwise, you can go to a dental hygienist. And then, of course, flossing or using the silicone-tipped toothpicks to clean in between your teeth as well. But the cleaning really is just mechanical. You don't need any pastes, mouthwashes, soaps, or any products like that, other than for whitening or stain removal, which I would suggest charcoal. So hopefully that is enough information to get you started. Okay, here is one of the questions that was submitted in advance. I am checking in to see if you developed a notice of liability for the H5N1 vaccine that seems to be coming soon. Well, you can't have a notice of liability for something that's not there yet, so it couldn't be finalized. But here's where I would suggest looking into if you want a effective, correctly done, high quality notice of liability. There's a group called InPower. They're originally founded by Cal Washington and some of his associates, and he is a very stand-up guy. And their notice of liabilities so far that have been deployed for smart meters and for the pandemic injections have been very, very effective. And you could take the one used for the injection probably and edit it to fit for this other potential issue that you mentioned. But I'm sure there will be, one in the works if such a situation arises that could be deployed fairly quickly. So take a look at Cal Washington and InPower for the best written and most effective notice of liabilities out there. All right. I know we have a few more. We could probably go another, let's say, 10, 15 minutes. All right. Was hoping for some mention of coffee's effect on bone health, particularly when there is osteoporosis. Do you have insight about this, Helen? I'm not aware of any data on coffee and bone health specifically. But there are, some misconceptions about coffee. I did look at the health effects of coffee as terms of what was in the scientific literature and presented it during a previous Healthy Living live stream. And there was some controversy among the audience in terms of their reactions. And there were comments, going both directions. That were both, very supportive of my determination that overall coffee seems to have many health benefits. And then there were some concerns expressed. So let me kind of answer that question for the folks out there. So first of all, there was one concern about that it would lower your magnesium levels. But I actually looked into that, and coffee, turns out, is rich in magnesium and actually supplies magnesium to your body. And this has been shown in clinical research where I believe the magnesium level went up after drinking coffee compared to not drinking coffee. So that problem was kind of easy to solve. And another issue was that people were pointing me to, I can't remember who it is now, but another YouTube science or health reporter who was talking about, really critical of coffee. But it turns out that was all based on research with caffeine. And caffeine, as used in research, would be a synthetic chemical, a pure pharmaceutical, very different from coffee, which is a natural product and contains, hundreds or thousands of chemicals that actually get into your cup of coffee, after it's the water is filtered through the ground up coffee beans. So we can certainly look at the research on caffeine and hypothesize that it may be generalizable to coffee, but it's a very, very different thing. And, when I look at the research of both substances, you see that coffee over and over again shown to have health benefits, whereas caffeine has a lot of pitfalls and detriments. So when you're trying to evaluate these things about coffee, it's important that you look carefully at what's out there. Of course, there's nothing definitive because there's not, we didn't lock up 100 people and make them drink, observe, eat everything that we say and do what we say and drink coffee, and then another 100 where they didn't drink coffee, right? We can't do those kinds of studies ethically. So we don't have definitive 100% evidence. But if you look at the totality of what's out there, I think that coffee is quite safe overall. And I think, what's said about bone health and osteoporosis is very misleading out there, and many of the things that we're said to do, you don't account for what really is the problem, right? Which there may be a deficiency in fat soluble vitamins like K2 and A and D, and we know about D, but nobody talks about the other ones, as well as possibly a dietary deficiency in collagen, and also a lack of any load-bearing physical activity, which is what can stimulate increased bone density. So I think it's it's a shame that so many people suffer from this, especially women. But I think that through some lifestyle changes, it generally is at least partially reversible and not related to coffee. Okay, Jay Edgerton asks, how to heal diverticulitis without antibiotics? Well, antibiotics don't heal diverticulitis, so you're healing without antibiotics even if you take antibiotics. Antibiotics are simply substances that will indiscriminately result in the death of all the bacteria inside your gut and elsewhere in your body. And they also inhibit inflammation so that your symptoms can temporarily resolve, but the problem still remains. So, diverticulitis, in a sense, is not any different than another acute infection. And what we know, from some studies and also observations of nature, that simply fasting, water fasting, so staying well hydrated, but not eating, will speed up healing. And of course, since this involves the bowels, I think this would, certainly be the first thing to do. Now, in addition to that, depending on how much inflammation it is, you may be able to administer some enemas, and they are gentle enough that they're not going to have a risk of perforation like a colonoscopy would, or even a colonic where the water is put under pressure. I would not attempt anything like that with diverticulitis, but just using a gravity drip of distilled water as an enema would be an excellent treatment to help cleanse the area. Now, depending on where the diverticulitis is exactly, you may not be able to fully reach it with an enema, but it's still going to promote the body to do its cleansing. And then I think, in addition to that, you want to look at what are the specific health issues of the individual and see how those relate to the diverticulitis and see what you can do to address those in the short term. But I think probably just a combination of water fasting and enemas, would be enough to allow your body to successfully heal in a relatively short amount of time. Now, of course, there are complications with diverticulitis that you need to be aware of. So you have to inform yourself, or I do actually offer urgent consultations for acute issues like that, because you want to make sure that if there is a perforation of the bowel, that which can occur spontaneously, that you want to be able to recognize that, so that may be the time that you need to go for emergency treatment. But if you early on at the first symptoms, start water fasting and doing some enemas, I think you'll be able to get through without any complications, most likely, unless you are in a really debilitated state of health. Okay, Eileen Kirsch asks, hi, Dr. Andy. In what order should I do or take the following, and why? Should any be done at the same time or on different schedules? And how long would I want to take each? Shilajit, zeolite, DMSO for eye cataracts, milk thistle, turpentine protocol. Do you have any other advice, re the above? Many thanks, Eileen. Well, one thing is I would recommend that you follow one protocol. So there's a lot of healing materials or substances out there that we know can be effective, right? Like the pine solvent, like milk thistle, like black seed oil, DMSO, many, many others. But these things have to be, utilized appropriately and properly. And you need to have several things that go with their use to avoid cleansing reactions, to make sure you have adequate amounts of the things, that your body's in a proper healing state, that you're not putting additional toxins into the body while you're using these substances. So firstly, I'd recommend that you have a proven or time-honored protocol, right? Like my Power of Pine protocol, or many of the protocols Amanda Vollmer has published or teaches. And that should contain instructions on how to combine various elements depending on if they are, relevant to that particular goal or that particular protocol. So that being said, let me just talk about the things you mentioned briefly. So Shilajit is a form of trace minerals that are in fulvic acid and humic acid. So it supplies trace minerals like a nutrient, and also has some chelating function that it can remove some toxic metals from the body while it supplies the right trace minerals. So this is something I think that unless we grow our own food and we know that the mineral content is adequate, that we should probably all take for life, some form of trace mineral supplement. It's, of course, especially relevant for detoxification because many of the enzymes that our bodies use for healing require metal cofactors like manganese and molybdenum that's contained in Shilajit. And also, if we may be removing some heavy metals from the body, so it's important that, one, you have enough of the right minerals, because the body will hold on to toxic metals if it's deficient in the right ones, and that there's some chelation. So the Shilajit, the fulvic acid in there, can actually help remove some of the toxic metals from the body. Zeolite is a natural mineral, and I have done a Healthy Living live stream about zeolite specifically, talking about all its different uses. It can actually be taken with food, and in the animal studies, it was given that way and shown not to, remove or prevent absorption of any minerals or vitamins. So it can be used that way, but you may not want to combine it with other healing substances because it's possible it could bind up some of them and prevent them from getting into the body. DMSO is the solvent. I talked about it, using it for cataracts earlier in this hour. Milk thistle is an amazing substance. It's the silmarin seed of the milk thistle plant, and it is miraculous for the liver. It kind of boosts the liver's function. It provides some essential nutrients for the liver, and can be critical in any kind of acute poisoning or overdose, like even Tylenol, poison mushrooms, things that are toxic to the liver. But it's also a key to help cleanse the liver, and it's often a good adjuvant to various types of general cleansing protocols. And it could be used just as a monotherapy also to decrease the symptoms of seasonal allergies or asthma, things like that. And the Power of Pine protocol, I think, I've definitely talked about it in this live stream series, as well as having the workshop available on my website as an evergreen product, and also have the interview, which was taken down off YouTube, with Dr. Tom Cowan. So you could find that on his website or his Odyssey or BitChute channel, where I talk about that more extensively. So hopefully that's a good kind of general introduction to how you might consider using natural substances for general health and detoxification. All right, Andy Steele asks, is it safe for children to fast? If so, how long? And any tips to facilitate that? Yes, it is safe, up to a point, of course, just like with adults. And it's important to have, the right knowledge, how much water should they drink? What do you need to monitor and be concerned for? And there are some excellent resources out there for that information. I have the Way of Water workshop, where I talk a lot about water fasting, and I've interviewed a water fasting expert on my channel before, Lauren Lockman. So you can certainly find out a lot of information from those sources. The duration of fasting is probably not going to be as long in general with children compared to adults, but it depends on, their growth and development and their body habitus. So, how much, if they're obese, they can certainly fast substantially longer. If they're, kind of thin and wiry to begin with, then you might have to limit it. So you want to go, just long enough that there's no issues with malnutrition or electrolyte disturbances. And the body is quite resilient. But I wouldn't really consider fasting for children unless you're dealing with, a serious health issue. And in that case, it can be very effective. So if you're not, sure the best way to go, I have a consultation service where I can help you, figure out the different options that would be most appropriate. Now, when you ask on tips how to facilitate it, I imagine what you're referring to is how to get the kid to do it. So if there's a real illness, the appetite might be affected. In fact, if the illness results in a lack of appetite, that's kind of an indication from the body that fasting is the right thing to do. So if that's the situation, then it might not be difficult at all to get the child to go along with fasting because they don't have an appetite anyway. And I know, some parents would actually struggle trying to force the kid to eat, thinking that they need to eat to regain their strength or to heal. But actually, fasting is a better way to go to accelerate the healing process. All right. Lynn Wirtz asks, and I think after this, maybe this will be the last question, or maybe one more. Lynn Wirtz asks, do you have any recommendations to help with mastitis? My daughter-in-law is dealing with this. Her baby is about 3 months now. So yeah, this can be a tricky thing, because if the goal, which I assume it is to continue breastfeeding, then you got to be careful about using any substances because they would come out into the breast milk. So you may have to, figure out a temporary solution or feed the child, goat's milk or donor breast milk or something different temporarily while you're dealing with this. Or you could go a more conservative route to, and still nurse, although your output may not be optimal during that time. But you definitely want to make sure that there's still flow. So if you're not going to nurse, then you're going to have to pump. But I think this is similar. Any acute infection, so water fasting would be the first thing. Now, of course, that's not going to be excellent for milk production, but you have to let the breast heal first before it's going to optimize the milk production. So you certainly can use just some simple mechanical and temperature approaches, like applying heat to the infected area, doing some gentle pressure massage toward the nipple to try and help drainage occur. If occasionally an abscess might form, in that case you may need to get someone to put a needle in there and withdraw the fluid, or cut it open and put a drain. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. And then if you want to, take a break from nursing and, feed the child another way, for maybe 3 days to a week while you heal, then you can apply healing solvent to the breast. Now, this will result in the quickest recovery. And this would be, substances like the pine solvent that we mentioned before, perhaps mixed with DMSO and with castor oil. And these substances, will come out in the breast milk. So you probably want to wait 24 to 48 hours after the last application to let it get out of the breast, and then you can resume nursing. So hopefully that is enough to help. And I definitely would, of course, be available for an urgent consultation for a situation like that to give more individualized information. All right, I'll take one more, Alexander. Okay, Aaron Patrick asks, What are your thoughts on sending in a revocation of election to the IRS and W-8 Ben to my employer for the purpose of removing myself from the income tax system? Is this necessary, or do you recommend a better way to accomplish this? Thank you, Andy. Well, when people ask me this question, and it's mostly been privately until now, I would ask, what did you elect to do in the first place that you are revoking? And if you can't answer that question, then the answer should be you should go back and figure out what that is that's talking about it. Now, the one document that I saw that came back from the IRS after someone filled out this form and sent it to them, it was addressed to Dear Taxpayer. So I'm not sure what that changed, but the truth is, similarly to what I was talking about before with, with driving, that you are already not a taxpayer. And you can look at the documentary film, America from Freedom to Fascism, produced by the late Aaron Russo, to find out some of the law around that. And it shows, that it's only an employee of the District of Columbia who's a taxpayer. And essentially our straw man, our all caps name, is the taxpayer. They are the ones responsible for paying that. So we have to, one, realize that it's not us and stop volunteering to do it. There are many ways to achieve this that are out there. John J. Singleton, whose website I believe is aceofcoins.com, has one way that is quite simple, and it involves no paperwork whatsoever to the IRS. But there are many other ways to address this. You can even easily use negotiable instruments or bills of exchange to settle a tax liability, as if you were the trustee of that trust account. And you can look at the IRS employee manual and actually see in the section where they're instructed on how to process these negotiable instruments. So there are many ways of kind of dealing with the IRS tax issue. You just have to first realize that we are actually not the taxpayer. We've just been voluntarily putting ourselves in that status, and we just need to stop doing what we're doing. We don't necessarily need to fill out a bunch of IRS forms to achieve that. Well, I want to thank you today for the really high quality questions on just a variety of topics, definitely challenging and testing my ability to think on the spot. So I really appreciate that, and of course encourage that, and realize that it's difficult sometimes to figure these things out, which is why I spend all my time trying to do just that, and hope that I provide a valuable service to all of you out there. And if you think that this is a valuable service, then consider taking it to the next level and signing up for my no-risk trial of the True Living Fellowship, so that you can get more of this, more stimulation, more thoughtful answers, and curation of information in a variety of topics that are key to us living a free, abundant, and rewarding life. I look forward to seeing everyone next week for another Healthy Living live stream. Until then.